Now, if ever there was a testament to human suffering, this is it. Welcome to HMP Wandsworth. I remember coming through these gates as a young, frightened, lost man. And it's foreboding to think of the history and how this was designed to intimidate, and it still serves that purpose today.
HMP Wandsworth has been locking up prisoners for nearly 200 years. But in 2024, an unannounced prison inspection revealed a long list of shocking failings. The governor resigned, and the government was forced to step in.
The Chief Inspector of Prisons has published recently an urgent notification, which is the highest red flag warning to ministers about a prison, what he describes as in complete chaos.
It's a very, very poorly run public institution that is failing on every single level.
Wandsworth is a vivid example of what can go wrong in prisons.
The catastrophic inspection followed one of the most embarrassing security breaches to hit the prison service when an inmate escaped in broad daylight.
Daniel Khalifa's escape from Wandsworth Prison is straight from a spy thriller.
Then, just weeks after the report was published, something even more shocking happened. A sex tape that would rock the jail further.
This is a movie, you know. Gangsters will know you.
After its worst year ever, we ask, what is going wrong at HMP Wandsworth?
Wandsworth has lost its purpose, except to be the butt of a national joke about the state of our prison system. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Many of its problems are down to the prison being badly overcrowded.
Wandsworth was originally conceived to house up to 1,000, but now it houses 1,500. More than half are on remand. In other words, they haven't yet been tried and convicted.
There's a lot of people moving, coming, going all the time, and that makes it very destabilising. That is one of the reasons it's so chaotic and dysfunctional, is no one's there very long.
Turnovers is ridiculous. You could have a different cellmate every day.
Almost a half, 46%, are foreign. It is an extraordinary multicultural mix.
It's guns, it's drugs, it's street gangs.
It's a load of smash and grab kids, load of armed robbers, OSGs, organised crime, drug dealers.
And you often have quite high-profile cases, be it sex crimes, terrorist offences, or big financial crimes.
There are so many inmates packed into Wandsworth, the vast majority must share a cell built for one.
The cells are 6 foot by 12 foot, and it's a complete lottery. So when you go in, you are literally just bunged in wherever there's a space.
If you're not padded up with the right person, mate, it could be a kamikaze in there, do you know what I mean? Yeah, it could be a kamikaze in there. I'm telling you, because some people live like pig stands. That's a lot of reason why even those things, that can cause a lot of fights in prison. For the hygiene. And then imagine you've got a cellmate that wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, he's on the old, you know what I mean? He's on the old shitter. At 6 o'clock, every single day he's on the shitter.
So you're basically sitting inside something the size of a disabled toilet for 23 hours a day sometimes for, 7 days a week. And that is inhumane.
And what's even worse is that the ageing cells and prison wings are falling apart. Though it's illegal to film in prison without permission, and we had nothing to do with filming this footage, clips filmed by inmates and uploaded to social media, and photos taken by the inspectors reveal the worst of it.
The state of the cells are horrible, man.
The smell, obviously, was very, very bad. The walls are just disgusting. They're covered in stains, a lot of graffiti.
The bunk beds have been up there for donkeys, do you know what I mean? You've got to get some wood to put on the bottom so your back's not curved.
Windows smashed out. Toilet's got a leak on it.
A prisoner will do a number 1 or a number 2, flush the toilet, and then all that toilet water coming out, filling up the cell, coming onto the landing. It was so disgustingly unhygienic.
And the showers are the most horrific thing I've ever seen. It's like black mold just creeping up from the bottom.
Yeah, filthy, man, filthy. As much as you clean it, it's still filthy. Do you see what I'm saying?
People call the conditions Victorian, I don't, because the Victorians would never keep people like that. The Victorians believed in cleanliness and believed in order. Cleanliness and order has long since left Wandsworth.
There's the odd picture sort of released in the media of this is what a cell looks like. And I think that's not even the worst of them. It made me quite ashamed to be a part of the service.
You've also got the bins overflowing inside the grounds of the prison, industrial bins, and it'll just be a rat fest.
You see rats 24/7. And I'm talking, these rats are massive. You might even think they're cats. They're that big, trust me.
Right, look at the conditions that we're living in, brother. Rats just running around and the govs don't give a fuck. Hey, welcome to HMP Wandsworth. HMP Wandsworth, you know? Dead rat, yeah, man.
You got to remember, you're eating in your cell as well. So when you finish eating or cooking, you're going to bag it. Mackerel and all these things got a smelly smell. You don't want to sleep with it straight out the window. Outside the window, you just see a pile of shit, dirt, rubbish. Prison's a dirty place. Rats might ever come in your cell. If you're on the ones, they're coming in your cell, so you gotta make sure your door at the bottom, you cover your door. That's the rats can't get in. Even mice, the mice got no back, so they can get under the door.
There was one time where this guy had complained about there was a hole in his wall and rats were coming in and eating his food. And he came to me in the office with a bread bag and he said to me, these are the rats that I caught last night. And there was honestly 6 rats in this bread bag. And I just thought, like, what are we doing?
Wandsworth is farming human beings in grotesque conditions. If you can't get the bins emptied, which is the basics of running a prison, what else is going wrong?
As it turns out, almost everything is going wrong at Wandsworth. In June 2024, one of the most high-profile prison scandals ever rocked the jail and shocked the world.
There is no clearer indication of the laxity in Wandsworth than the remarkable video that appeared in June 2024 of a prison officer, Linda de Souza Abreu, having sex with an inmate.
This was both surprising and shocking because I didn't realise how far the establishment had fallen before this tape came out.
The acts were filmed by a fellow inmate in some detail.
Guys, we made history, that's what I'm telling you.
And the video was circulated on social media. There was every indication in the video that the prison officer was an enthusiastic participant.
Out of you, looked a bit, should we say, eventful, but it's prison for you, innit? I don't know why it happened or how it happened, but it looked eventful.
Yeah, it's just the adrenaline now. It's just the adrenaline, innit? The adrenaline of, mate, you're having a go in jail. You could get caught. People like it's the feeling, and it's like Mile High Club, innit? Having it on the plane. It's like those are one of the clubs, innit? So, yeah.
But the most telling phrase of all is the man who was filming looks at the camera and says,
"That's how we live at Wandsworth, bro. Yeah."
She should never have made it through the vetting process. She came in, a few months later she did this sex tape and she's done that to promote her OnlyFans. It was clearly a PR stunt.
But was it all for publicity? Or was the officer filmed as part of a wider network of prisoners grooming guards to bring in contraband?
Prison is a very predatory place, and the sharks sense blood in the water.
When a female prison officer was filmed having sex with an inmate in a cell inside Wandsworth, it was one of the biggest scandals to hit the prison system. 30-year-old married mother Linda de Souza Abreu was arrested trying to flee the country and charged with misconduct in public office.
It was staggering to me in all sorts of ways. I mean, first of all, the impunity that was on display there, where she didn't seem to care that she was being filmed. And prisons are awash with mobile phones, things get uploaded all the time. Hundreds of thousands of people will see it. So either she was completely oblivious to the risks to herself, or she simply knew them and didn't care. What does that say about who is recruited to the prison service?
It turned out that Linda de Souza Abreu had quite a explicit site on OnlyFans and had a reputation of being a swinger, according to her sister.
I think it highlights an issue with vetting and also staffing levels, because if a female officer has time to be in a cell filming a sex tape with a prisoner, why did other staff not see that?
Nobody bangs on the door. No one seems to bat an eyelid. It's an incredible commentary on the state of affairs inside what is supposed to be a secure Category B prison.
And it highlights the danger that a woman could be dragged into a cell and sexually assaulted, and that wouldn't have been noticed by staff.
Another issue is the security catastrophe that this represents. You've got a prison officer who's got keys, who's got a radio, who's got a baton, who's got incapacitant spray, round her ankles, as it appeared. And any of those things could have been taken off her. She could have been overwhelmed, and they could have been used against staff. If anything describes the abject descent of Wandsworth into anarchy, it is that sex tape.
The reaction to the tape was shock and outrage from those on the outside, but it was less of a surprise to those on the inside.
Having sex in prison is on every prisoner's mind. Everyone wants to get their leg over in there, mate. I tell you that for free. There's kids in there that will pay big money. Do you know what I mean? So it's like everyone's trying to get off their tick list, innit? And maybe for some of the staff, it crosses their mind, but some of them are smart and some of them ain't, innit? Smart enough not to get caught.
Some of these guys are very young, they're very ripped, they're very good looking, and I dare say that some officers go into the job because they get to associate with guys like that.
It is a complicated dynamic. There's obviously a power dynamic and just a gender dynamic between a male and a female.
Having a romp in the pads, do you know what I mean? Bolts and blowies. The bolts and blowies are when you go in the cell. So once a week or twice a week, they got to go in the cells and check the glasses and that. You know what I mean? So they got to do bolts and then they give a little blowy. You can't go wrong with that, I'm telling you. Do you know what I mean? People pay big money for bolts and blowies.
Not only are relationships between staff and inmates strictly forbidden at Wandsworth, they represent a serious security risk.
Prison is a very predatory place, and the sharks sense blood in the water. So if you reveal some weaknesses that way, prisoners are very quick to spot it and quick to exploit it for all kinds of reasons.
Some of these criminals are smart, manipulative. Yes, they'll try and corrupt you. There's guys in prison, remember they've been in prison 2-3 years, and all they've got to do is just work on themselves. Every day he's pumping weights, he looks, do you know what I mean? And every day he walks past you and he says, oh, you look all right, you look like that smile, keep smiling. Your hair looks nice, just the little things. Your hair looks nice. Had your nails done. Just one little compliment every day. Remember, there's time to work on them. Some people bite to it, like, take the bait, you see what I'm saying?
I think it can happen over time where people are groomed, maybe female officers are groomed and manipulated.
They would start some kind of illicit sexual relationship and they would film the officer. Why? Blackmail. So they could then say to the officer, like, we're going to show this to the police and you're going to go to prison yourself, or you start bringing in drugs for us.
To be able to blackmail an officer, inmates need evidence. And while mobile phones are forbidden in Wandsworth, it seems like most inmates have no problem getting their hands on one.
Phones are coming in all the time, drugs are coming in all the time, SIM cards are coming in all the time. I often felt I was the only person in that prison who did not have a mobile phone. They were everywhere. You'd walk into a cell, people would be on and they'd be chatting to their mates, or they'd be gambling with them, or they were just WhatsApping people. So there was the feeling that if you are going to shag a prisoner in his cell and his cellmate's in that room with you, then there's a high chance that he's going to have a phone and whoops, he can film it.
Yeah, mate, they're in there, innit? They're in there. wheeler dealing, innit? It's part of the wheeler dealing crew. Do you know what I mean? If you're a wheeler dealer, you're a wheeler dealer. If you're not a wheeler dealer, you ain't getting no phone, innit? Whatever you want is in jail. You can more time get anything. You see what I'm saying?
I think the searching of staff when they come in is inconsistent and completely inadequate. So I think probably a lot of phones come in, unfortunately, that way. Sometimes they don't x-ray you because they're not trained in the x-ray machine, or they're short of staff themselves, so you just walk straight through. And I think it's very easy to bring things in because you're not searched properly on a regular basis.
With the lack of proper security at the gates, blackmail is only one of the options for inmates to obtain contraband.
You've also got corrupt staff who are bringing it in. When the staff are being paid literally minimum wage to go in and be spat at and beaten up every single day, and then someone comes to them and say, we'll pay you £1,000 a week cash just to bring in some of these packages, why not?
I think corruption and manipulation of staff is a function directly of the sort of staff that are being selected and recruited and trained, and a lack of leadership in the front line.
I think it's indicative of the fact that the most experienced prison staff are no longer there in positions where they can actually give advice and steer people the right way.
Staffing problems at Wandsworth began 15 years ago, when the government cut the numbers of officers across the entire prison estate.
The criminally stupid ideological vandalism inflicted on the prison service after 2010 in the name of austerity, which slashed frontline prison staff by about 25% between 2010 and 2016. The people that were culled were experienced staff because they were the most expensive staff, and it was made attractive for them to take voluntary exit. But the people that have replaced those officers in Wandsworth, they are vastly inexperienced.
They got rid of the people who knew how to run the prisons. Now what you've got is youngsters who are, and I know this is a cliche, who are stacking shelves in Aldi last year, and they're now having to run a wing with, say, 80 criminals on it.
50% of the staff in Wandsworth have less than a year's experience. That is a problem for the prison.
Teenagers sometimes, literally teenagers, who have had the world's most useless training being thrown into the maw of what the Prison Officers Association often refer to as the most violent workplace in Western Europe.
You're taking orders from who that's almost 18. It's got no life skills at all. You're telling me what to do. Forget about it, bro. You don't know nothing. Too young. They're hiring any and anybody. Before there was a certain bar you had to pass to be a prison officer. That's no longer.
These very, very young recruits were like rabbits in front of the headlights, and they look terrified. And they would come up to me and ask me, what time do you open people for lunch? And I would be explaining to an officer how to run their own wing because they were that green and inexperienced.
Julia was 26 when she got the job at Wandsworth.
I was a prison officer at H&P Wandsworth from 2021 to 2024. I applied online. The interview was quite brief, and then you do 6 weeks training where it's very much like you can't fail the training. They push everyone through, even when people are clearly not suitable, and no shadowing in prisons. So you did your training sort of with no reference on how you would apply that to a prison setting, because most people had never seen a prison, and you started the job.
Yet, despite recruiting new officers, last year's revealing prison inspection report found that Wandsworth was desperately short-staffed.
Staff absence remains a problem for Wandsworth, and there is no disguising it. Chief Inspector of Prisons Charlie Taylor said there simply weren't enough staff to cope with the inmates in Wandsworth, and that 30% were missing on average on any particular day.
There were so few staff available to do the basics, I'm talking about unlocking prisoners so they could be fed, that routinely all the officers who worked in security were redeployed to the wings.
Staff absence was a horrendous problem, and that means that on certain days you have 1,500 damaged, vulnerable, dangerous prisoners locked up, and sometimes 40 officers for the entire prison. And you wonder why people escape.
A direct result of the lack of staff at Wandsworth is a controversial routine called bang up.
This is my introduction to bang up, which basically means that most prisoners, most of the time, are locked in their cells for 23 hours a day, sometimes more. So that means that you are stuck in this tiny, tiny room that is not designed for you to live in. It's designed for you to sleep in. And it just means that you go mad.
They don't know day to day whether they're going to get unlocked or not.
It's restricted coming out. It's locked in the cell. Nothing to do. Unnecessary. Don't know why it's like that.
You can't stretch your legs. You can't have a shower. You can't wash. And just imagine going for days at a time without washing.
I think it's completely unacceptable for people to be in their cells for so long, but it does come down to staffing. And if you just don't have the staff, it isn't safe then to unlock people and have them out when you have 2 officers on that wing.
That's the excuse any jail in the country is going to tell you now. We ain't got the staff, we ain't got the staff. But the moment you press the bell and something happens, staff come out of nowhere. So in my eyes, it's all a lie. They just choose to keep you banged up because it's easier for them.
I mean, bang up is a curse across the prison system, and it is one of the causes of so many problems. So you put people in that situation and they start to crack up. And when they crack up, there's literally one escape for them, which is drugs. So that's why drug use is so prevalent in prisons, because they're stuck in this tiny, tiny box all day, every day, going out their minds. And that little spliff of spice is the only escape that's being offered to them.
Although there is another route out of Wandsworth, as the prison discovered when a threat to national security walked out of the jail in plain sight.
How did he get out? How did he get out?
In its early days, Wandsworth Prison was infamous for very different reasons.
Wandsworth is one of the oldest prisons in the United Kingdom. Opened in 1851, it became the South London centre of hanging. Hanging was our way of treating murder. It was a capital offence. Some called it inhumane. But nevertheless, there are those who felt very strongly, and indeed some still do, that if you take a life, you should pay with your own. Between 1878 and 1961, there were 135 hangings in Wandsworth.
Famous cases, Derek Bentley, lots of people during the war, traitors, spies, etc. And after the hanging, they would literally hang a notice on that gate to inform people that the execution had been carried out. And to this day, there is lots of prisoners still buried in unmarked graves within the walls of that prison.
During those times, Wandsworth Prison was feared, as inmates would go in and never come out alive. Hanging was eventually abolished in 1965, yet nowadays things are perhaps worse. Prisoners are now going in and walking out whenever they want.
Daniel Khalifa had been in jail for terrorist offences.
The 21-year-old soldier had been awaiting trial after being discharged from the army, and he'd been charged with trying to pass information, it's believed, to Iran, as well as leaving hoax bomb devices outside his military base.
Daniel Khalifa escaped from the prison by tying himself underneath a food delivery truck. He created a sort of sling of sheets with clips at either end. They had a pretty cursory examination of the truck, didn't see Khalifa, and he drove out of the prison underneath the truck.
The main gatehouse there is the main secure point of entry into this prison, where you come in as a prisoner and you leave as a prisoner. Over there is a service gate, where vehicles, deliveries come in and out. So this is a very high security area. That was obviously a security failing at that point of entry and exit.
He drove down the hill from the prison to the big roundabout at Wandsworth Bridge, where he rolled out of the harness he'd made for himself and walked into Wandsworth. It was an extraordinary escape. It created an enormous storm.
Daniel Khalifa's escape from Wandsworth Prison is straight from a spy thriller.
authorities face a barrage of questions about how this could possibly have happened.
I was shocked, like everybody else was, at the audacity of this. I mean, that is a catastrophic series of technical and human security failures, all combining to allow such a thing to happen.
It was one of those things that surprises only people who haven't been to Wandsworth, because all these news programmes and current affairs shows are all going, how on earth could someone escape from Wandsworth? And I say, no, how on earth doesn't this happen more often? Because I'd seen how dysfunctional the place is.
In fact, there's been a history of security failings at Wandsworth over the years. Perhaps the most famous one of all was involving great train robber Ronnie Biggs.
For really determined men, no prison is escape-proof, including train robbers Charles Wilson and Ronald Biggs.
In 1965, Ronnie Biggs literally ran across the yard at Wandsworth Prison, climbed up over the wall, got to the top of the wall, and jumped onto the top of a removal van, which the accomplice had parked outside. Biggs became probably the most famous escaped prisoner in British penal history.
Since Biggs, there's been reports of 8 escapes or attempted escapes from Wandsworth, including a virtually identical one to Khalifa's, when an inmate clung onto the underside of a departing van. To try and understand the security failings at Wandsworth, we must look at the chain of events which led to the Khalifa escape.
How did he get out? How did he get out? They couldn't put the mirrors underneath the truck. That's crazy. I've been in 34 different prisons, probably about, I don't know, 3,000 times, and never once have they not put the mirrors under the truck.
You know, people just weren't following the rules, basically. You know, these vehicles ought to have had a security person escorting it from the gate to the kitchen, having the vehicle unload its spuds or whatever it is in the kitchen, and then all the prisoners should be accounted for by the person in charge of the kitchen before the operational support grade escorts the vehicle back through the sterile gates, back through the double gates into the airlock of the gatehouse, where it then should be searched.
But the failing of Wandsworth Prison's gate security turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg.
Wandsworth is a BCAT. You can escape from a BCAT, and it's been escaped from more than 5 or 6 times. How the hell do you go from looking at this guy, terrorism, British Army, and go, do you know what? Stick him in Wandsworth. People have escaped out there before. He should have been in Belmarsh, the prison that they built specifically for people like him. But here's the worst part that a lot of people don't understand. He worked in the kitchen. In order to get into the kitchen, you have to have a further security clearance because the kitchen holds knives and weapons that you could use if you've got the experience of using them.
If you had a functioning security department, that area would have been audited constantly, and systems ought to have been tested constantly to make sure there were contingency plans in place to stop it from happening, or if it did happen, to shut the prison down very quickly to a standstill. And, of course, one of the problems was the delay.
It took a full 43 minutes for the security team at Wandsworth to alert the police.
I think something that people wonder about a lot is why it took so long for them to phone the police and say that a prisoner was missing. And that's because we lose prisoners all the time, and we normally find them hiding under someone else's bed or being silly in the shower and haven't escaped. So if we phoned the police every time we lost a prisoner, it would be incredibly embarrassing. So after they realised, oh, Daniel's not here, they had to check the kitchen, his cell, the library. He could have been anywhere. So that's why it took such a long time for them to realise he'd actually escaped. You wouldn't expect that from a prison. You would think you know where your prisoners are at all times, but you don't.
In fact, Wandsworth's officers would rely on the prisoners themselves to account for inmates' whereabouts, like Chris Atkins, who served time for fraud there in 2016.
One of the best jobs I had was doing the register. And that was a job they gave to me, a prisoner, who had been imprisoned for a very, very high-profile crime of dishonesty. And they were entrusting me to tick everyone's name off and ensure that they really, really were where they were supposed to be. Now, I could have easily ticked someone off and said, yes, yes, he's gone to his sewing workshop, where actually he'd really jumped on a van and gone out the front. The fact that entrusting prisoners like me with the register and ensuring prisoners are where they're supposed to be shows you that there's so many cracks in the system.
So basically everything that could go wrong must have gone wrong.
There was a manhunt, a remarkable manhunt for Khalifa.
There is now a £20,000 reward for information that leads to arrest.
Helicopters scouring this park in Richmond, with sightings in Kew and Chiswick overnight and into this morning.
Keep an eye out for this man. Do not approach this man, is the advice from the police. If you think you've seen this man, err on the side of caution and let the police know.
Eventually, he was spotted, of all unlikely places, on the towpath of the Grand Union Canal in Northolt, where he was recaptured 3 days later.
After a year detained at Wandsworth, inmates Randall and Dylan also wanted to escape from the jail.
Got to a stage and I said to myself, you know what? I need to get out of there. It's too much frustration every day, man, taking a piss. From governors to one straps. So I said, you know what? So I had enough. So I went in my cell, packed up my tent, got all my stuff, flew over the netting to the safety net. Got on there. When I was on there, next minute, 3 other people got on there with me.
So when these things happen, it goes in stages, innit? So they'll come out, the staff will still be allowed on the wing, and they'll be talking to you, like, negotiating with you, like, oh, you're gonna come off and blah, blah, blah.
I said, we ain't talking, mate. I'm getting all that today. You're gonna see madness, I'm gonna show you madness. So I was on there, went through the gears, pacing up and down.
Just started smashing up the wing and that. Laundry cupboards, laundry rooms, pipes, flooding out the whole of the wings, the laundry rooms, kicking the doors off.
So I ended up climbing up all the roof space, got into the roof space.
That's a difficult place for them to get us off.
Stripped off. Now I'm naked up there. Part of the old theatrics, innit? I'm naked, I'm a madman. I'm gonna do anything you're gonna do. You don't wanna get close to me. That type of vibe, innit? They left us there for a good couple hours, had the wing to ourselves. Then out of nowhere, I saw a sea of officers coming through with helmets and dogs and all that.
Get down, blah, 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 shouting, trying to intimidate us and it's like...
Put some safety net out, pulver sprayed us, got us down, took us to the block, strip searched us, gave us a little hiding, put us on the bus.
Buses were waiting for us straight away, so we was gone within seconds.
Didn't tell us where I was going. I ended up in bed for that 3 o'clock in the morning. Mission accomplished. It's what I wanted, did I? Wanted that.
It's another day in jail.
Dylan and Randall would never return to Wandsworth. They too had escaped from the prison and its most shocking secret.
I saw so much blood I didn't even want to think about, and by the time they took him to the hospital, he was dead.
On the day Daniel Khalifa escaped in broad daylight from Wandsworth, almost 40% of operational staff were missing from duty.
On the day of Khalifa's escape, no fewer than 80 prison staff were not present in the prison because of sickness, training, or annual leave.
Some staff absences are down to prison officers struggling with the stress of managing the chaos at Wandsworth.
You know, staff mental health was appalling because they had to deal with horrendous violence and trauma on a daily basis.
There's always staff off on long-term sick, and I definitely had a lot of sick absences while I was there, mostly down to work-related stress.
Recalling one traumatic experience, Julia believes there was a lack of support available at Wandsworth.
The management around traumatic incidents isn't good. For example, I was on night duties and I had to escort a prisoner to hospital. It was a very protracted incident, it took a very long time. And as an escorting officer, I'm the one chained to the prisoner during this incident and waited with him while they sort of turned the life support machine off and all of that. And then when we went back to the prison, it was maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, and all we wanted was to just go outside and have a cigarette and a breath of fresh air to try and process what had happened. And they said, no, you can't. We only have 5 officers. You have to stay in the jail. And then I waited 7 months for a trauma risk assessment for that.
Staff often had breakdowns. There's a lot of staff suicides. There was one member of staff who killed himself while I was at Wandsworth. Prison officer suicides, a huge unreported problem.
And it doesn't only affect the staff. Many inmates who end up in Wandsworth are unwell, and their mental illnesses are exacerbated inside.
Governor himself estimated that up to 90% of all prisoners in Wandsworth had some kind of mental health problem. When you go there, it's very, very easy to believe that.
According to Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons, the rate of self-harm in Wandsworth was high and rising.
I saw so much blood I don't even want to think about during my time in Wandsworth. And by having so many people inside a prison like that, the staff that are there are completely overwhelmed. And of course, they don't know what to do. They have no training in mental health whatsoever. So how are they going to deal with someone who's got paranoid schizophrenia? And that's the problem. Rather than treat them as medically unwell and give them healthcare and support, they would be punished for misbehaving. And that's what happened to Osvaldas Pigueras. He was 18 when he was arrested for stealing sweets, so hardly the crime of the century. He was Lithuanian, and he clearly had mental health problems, but because there wasn't a translator there when he was given his mental health assessment, they just said, yeah, no mental health problems whatsoever. He was found with a noose on 5 different occasions. They punished him. They punished him for having a noose. So he was sent to the punishment block, which is where they're supposed to send only the most violent and really, really dangerous prisoners. And he was locked in the seg, and he hit his emergency bell. No one came. And when they went to the cell, they'd found that he'd hung himself again. And by the time they took him to hospital, he was dead.
For some officers, cases of suicide and the way Wandsworth deals with it proved way too much.
In 2022, there was a suicide on my unit of a young prisoner. And after I left work that day, there were loads of messages in our staff WhatsApp group chat saying really horrible things about him and that they hope he suffered while he died. And I was really upset by that. We have an enormous amount of responsibility and a duty of care. So if you're celebrating the suicide of a prisoner, you clearly can't be trusted to actually carry out the duty of care that you have for those people. So I reported that, and 2 people from the group chat were suspended immediately. And they sat down with me and said, we have to move you from your unit because you're not safe. You're at risk from staff. And I thought it was really shocking to admit that staff posed an actual threat to another staff member, and for them to say that was the reason that I should be removed from my job, rather than that they should challenge very problematic views of staff who then would pose a threat to me. So I was moved off of my unit, and I was very unhappy. I felt very unsafe, and it just made me paranoid, and it made me really hard to just come in and do my job. I was really mentally damaged by what had gone on, and I tried to kill myself. So I left Wandsworth 5 or 6 months ago. I have a lot of nightmares about things I saw in prison because now I have time to process the madness of what actually went on there. And it makes me more determined that I have to work towards trying to fix it because it's all so horribly wrong.
Wandsworth is failing at every level, and everyone's safety is compromised. The inmates, the staff, and the general public. Some feel the problems lie higher up.
Wandsworth is about a 20-minute cab ride from Petty France near St James's Park tube station, where the MOJ has its headquarters. Yet, 20-minute cab ride away, a prison is falling apart in plain sight. And this is the point. It takes the accident of a random, unannounced inspection by our independent regulator to reveal to all of these people just how disgracefully bad this place has become. That is a function of basic competence and leadership.
There aren't enough staff. The institution, the infrastructure of the building is collapsing. It is a recipe for a catastrophe.
You've got a chief executive of this organisation that is failing on multiple fronts, who is totally invisible. People wouldn't even know who she was, who never seems to appear to give any account in public as to why places like Wandsworth are failing. And you can solve overcrowding, but unless you deal with the corporate failures of this organisation, at the top, we will have more Wandsworths. Guaranteed.
Now the government has stepped in with more funding and a plan for the prison. But will it be enough to prevent the next disaster from happening?
In the wake of Khalifa's escape and Charlie Taylor's report on the prisons, he issued an urgent notification directly to the government demanding that they make amendments to Wandsworth to improve it. And indeed, the government committed £100 million. But it's over a period of years, and it's going to take a very long time to turn that colossal institution into something better. In the meantime, it is still festering.
For many, the government's intervention is too little, too late.
In my heart, I think that Wandsworth should be closed down. I think there is so much corruption and such a toxic culture that you can keep trying to fix things on top of that, but you are just papering over cracks by trying to fix it.
Wandsworth, burn it, raise it to the ground, take bulldozers to it. It's a human sewer. It needs to be torn down, brick by brick.
If you go to Wandsworth, look at that real estate. You could sell it for several £billion, I think. I mean, it's a huge site. Knock it all down, turn it into luxury flats. The government would make a fortune. You could build a far more effective, far cheaper, far better run prison 30 or 40 miles away on some brownfield site. I mean, the thing just needs to end tomorrow. There's absolutely no salvation for it whatsoever, and you're only going to throw good money after bad and have more lives destroyed because of it.
An MOJ spokesperson said the government inherited a prison system in crisis. Overcrowded prisons with crumbling infrastructure put our staff at risk of violence and harm. We have taken immediate action to improve safety, security and conditions. We have deployed specialist staff and will redirect £100 million to be spent over 5 years. We will continue to do what is necessary to protect the public, lock up offenders and make prisons safe for staff. The prison has a new leadership. Cell windows and showers are being repaired. We have invested in X-ray body scanners. We are bolstering our counter-corruption unit and vetting processes. All new joiners must pass an assessment process and complete 10 weeks training. We've introduced measures to support staff in raising concerns. All staff receive suicide and self-harm prevention and mental health awareness training. We accepted recommendations made by the Ombudsman after the death of Osvaldas Pagiris.